had Zeus as their god, and Mars, which was a version of Ares or Eris. So basically, Mars was just Eris, and the Trojans worshipped Athena, which was just Zeus. So they pretty much were a worshipping nation of fire signs. So like a version of Sparta, uh, a different kind of Sparta. There was the high priest of Apollo who was given the opportunity to relay messages between Minerva and Hector and Priam, and became to be rescued because he had Apollo, and Apollo was different from Mars, the war god, and Zeus, the father. Apollo was a son that was into medicine, into music, and was responsible for the Oracle of Delphi, or the Oracle of Apollo, was an oracle which was ultimately the spring ground for uh, wisdom or intelligence of all kind. You could, like a divination. So he did divination too. Uh, Helenus was given an opportunity because Minerva wanted to kill the Trojans because they were not going to consider her as important as the goddess as a god. So basically, she wanted to kill the Trojans, and she left some alive, only a few of them, and she would destroy all of Troy and kill every last man and child, but she would spare a few that she would want to use for keeping the Trojan race not extinct, but not allowed to exist as the way she didn't want to exist, which was fine with Zeus and even Mars ultimately. But Eris had caused that. Eris had caused the problem big time in the first place, and also, it's important to know that Mars replaced Eris because Eris was murdered by Athena. So in mythology, they don't tell you that. Well, they say that Eris just kind of disappeared out of the story. Mars just kind of appears in the mythology. Truth is, Mars was a replacement for Eris because Minerva has to get possessed by Eris. So basically, the war god possesses a goddess to make her who she is. So a goddess can't be a goddess unless she's got a god. But a god can be himself without her. So a god can be a god because he is himself. He doesn't need her. But a goddess will need a god to be possessed by that god. And then she's him and herself. And now she can be a goddess. So the way that a goddess is herself is different from how a god is himself. He won't be dependent upon her for anything. So the mentality of men don't need women. Like, I really don't need her. But the reality is that she'll need him. And so she can actually be strong and powerful with him, but not really without him. And she could also be powerful without him, but it'll be in some form of disconnection and deception and or dispossession. So Helenus was a high priest of Apollo. He was one who was dedicated to his god, and he also had a chance to deliver a message directly to Hector and Priam, and Minerva actually went to him when he was in the temple of Apollo. This is also not in the mythology, This is just what I've taken. This Troy was a true story, and that's what's crazy about it. And so she showed up to that temple, and he got down on his knees, and basically he bowed down to her like she was a goddess, and the Trojans wouldn't bow down to her at all. So not only would they not bow down to her, but they wouldn't even see her as more than a wife or a daughter at best, whom they would have little time for often. So it was in there treating her like she was, not giving her any respect or giving her recognition that she was a goddess. Well, like her father was a god, her father Zeus, who looked at his daughter as a daughter and so less than him, which was also why the Trojans looked at her as less than them, or not as equal, or at least not more than. So Trojan men would look at Minerva, the goddess, and say like, well, your dad, who's our god, doesn't see you as anything more than a daughter, and maybe a nuisance or irritation. She would be really mad about that, because she'd say, you're talking about my dad. You know, you're saying, you're acting like my dad. You're trying to look at me like you could be my dad. You're just a man. You're not a god. And ultimately, Helenus was was one Trojan that was different from all the other Trojans in the entire world of Troy, because he was a high priest of Apollo, so he had a respect for her. But not only that, but when she showed up, he bowed down to her with such a reverence and gave her such a respect that she was shocked, because she'd never seen a Trojan do that and didn't think that a Trojan would do it or even could do it. But ultimately, she saw Helenus did it, and he was very polite and very absolutely giving her everything she wanted, like everything she would have demanded if she'd gotten what she wanted. So she saved him. She saved him by getting him captured. So she told him that you have to go, you're going to get captured. She had told him, you're going to get captured and everyone's going to die. He went to a Last Supper for his with his dad and his brother right before Troy completely fell and was sacked. Well, Helenus was told by goddess Minerva that you'll get kidnapped, but go have dinner, and you could give him one last talk, try one last time to tell him that Troy will fall if that palladium disappears from the Athena's temple. So the last thing he would have said to his dad and his brother, and he tried it many times, would have been, if that palladium disappears from that temple, this Troy's gone. It'll be sacked. It's over with. Our protection's lost. And ultimately, his brother and his dad were very aware that if the palladium was going to be removed, then it would be like the end of Troy. He had said that. He had told them that, like, you have to know. Now, I don't know that they dismissed that idea that he would tell them that, like, the palladium is a statue of Athena. It's in the temple. It's in Athena's temple. And he told his father and his brother that if that statue disappears from the temple, Troy will fall. Troy will be sacked, and we'll lose all the protection. So he had told him that. But then he went to get captured. And they captured him. And then they interrogated him. And then he told the Achaeans and the Danaans what Apollo told him to say. So Apollo, the sun god, had a plan. His plan was to have Helenus first go to his dad and his brother and say that there's a palladium statue of Athena in the Athena's temple in our city, and it has to be under guard, or it has to be guarded at all times. And if it becomes missing at all, then Troy's going to be falling. That's what Apollo told Helenus to tell his brother, and so that was what Apollo told him. But Minerva told him that he was going to get kidnapped, and then he'd be taken away. So he was ready for it, and when he got kidnapped, After he told his brother and father that at the dinner, when he got kidnapped, he was interrogated by, well, the enemy, which was he was interrogated by uh, Ulysses, or I can't remember the name of the guy, but the Achaeans and the Danaans, the enemy. And he told the enemy, they said, well, they were trying to find out, how can we sack Troy? Well, understand, Apollo the god was the deciding factor for why Troy got sacked. And Apollo the god was a god that upbraided gods, meaning Apollo would think of himself as his father, and actually as his father, which means that Apollo and his dad Zeus didn't get along. Zeus didn't care what Apollo thought, really. Like, Apollo was the son of Zeus, and Zeus didn't really care at all what his son thought or what his opinions were, because Zeus's thinking process was a commander and a soldier superior to his wife. But Apollo is a musical god of music, a god of medicine, healing, also giving plagues. So Apollo was much more than his dad, actually, even though he was only a son and not the highest. So when Helenus was captured and they were interrogating him, he told them, they were trying to figure out, like, how are we going to give us your secrets? Like, how are we going to destroy Troy? And he had already prepared this plan. So Helenus he set the grounds for what was about to happen next. And it was truly Minerva and Apollo's idea for what happened next. They had set the grounds. So he told under interrogation, he told them that if that goddess disappears from Troy, they will fall. And that he was talking about the Palladium statue, a statue of a Palladium. It's called the Palladium. It's actually real. You could look it up. But it's called the Palladium. It's a statue of Athena. And it was inside a temple that was in Troy, in the city of Troy. It was unguarded, basically. But he had told them that literally they have to guard it, because if it disappears, like, Troy's doomed. And ultimately, the Hector and Priam didn't think that the Palladium of Athena statue was worth guarding, other than by the priests. And they also didn't think that there was anything significantly, well, the fact that it might disappear wasn't a big deal. The goddess might disappear out of that temple, statue of her. Well, they didn't think that was like the end of the world, and it certainly was the end of Troy. It would have been that why Helenus would be king over many lands. Helenus survived the Trojan War, and he was king over many lands. So he survived long after the Trojan War. He was actually king again. He was a king himself, like his dad. But a different place. Helenus was a man who respected Eros, and ultimately only respected him, and so would accept him to respect him. But his god was Apollo, and he gave Minerva absolute respect, and he saw her for what she is, a goddess, and so she liked him, and she thought he was the only Trojan worthy of living. Well, I mean, other than Aeneas, a few of them, like the founder of Rome. So understand that Troy was murdered off by goddesses, and basically even gods, because Apollo was a helper of helping Minerva destroy Troy, even though Apollo was also on Troy's side. And that would be because Apollo was trying to shift the belief of the men that were Trojan men, that would act like their father and look at the goddess as she's just a daughter, or she can't be a goddess. She can't be. So Apollo was trying to help Minerva change the minds of those Trojans, so that they would absolutely realize that you can't look at a goddess as your daughter and that's it. Like you're going to dismiss her, like you're busy. You don't got time for her. That's what happened to Minerva. Her interactions with the Trojan population of men were often so disappointing because, or even angered her greatly because she would possess a woman and then have that woman try to influence the society through her husband. And men were mostly in charge or in power or had the ability, change the laws. And men wouldn't listen to her because they had Zeus. Their god was Zeus, who was her father. So they would actually look at her like, you're just the daughter of our god. Like, like you're cute and all that, but like, what do you want? We're busy men. We're Zeus men, you know? And then, of course, Zeus thought that too. So Zeus would tell Minerva, why are you messing with my Trojan men? I gave them favor and I would give them favor. So Zeus liked the Trojans as his best heroes. And ultimately, Apollo liked the Trojans as not his best heroes at all, but like his dad's best heroes. But Apollo would truly look at his little brother like, my brother's got every problem in the world, and my brother's an angry war god. And he doesn't like his sisters, and he fought with Athena a lot. And Eris he got murdered, is what I'll tell you, and that's the truth. Eris was murdered, and they didn't say that in the mythology because, well, I don't know the exact reason, except to say that the reason has something to do with the fact that Apollo helped Minerva secretly. That was probably a secret too for a long time, is that Apollo was in on it to hopefully not have to destroy Troy, but ultimately to protect them too, if they would change, if they would actually be willing to change. And Apollo would never make demands on the Trojans, like they have to listen to her, but he would help her kind of in the background. And so Minerva would consider Helenus a Trojan that was worthy of her, of whatever she was trying to create. A world of men that would recognize her or give her some respect, or that she could be divine. Um, Helenus was not a man of Minerva. He was not a worshiper of Minerva. He respected Minerva like for who she was, because she was actually a goddess, and he was a high priest of Apollo, not Minerva. He never was a high priest of Minerva. So the important thing to know about that is that Minerva would think she's a goddess, and then she would be wanting people to be officially her, followers. The thing about Helenus is that she wanted to save him, but she didn't expect that he had to follow her or even be under her, really, as far as she's a goddess. But his recognition of her was what she liked and was glad about. And ultimately, he was a high priest of Apollo and couldn't be anything more. So the fact that he recognized Minerva didn't subtract from the fact that he's still Trojan, which meant that she knew that he couldn't really give her any recognition other than be polite, you see, or be sincere. He couldn't really worship a goddess because he worshipped his god Apollo. That's who he could worship only. Um, and it worked. It worked because it brought a way. It was a way that the goddess could be interacting with whatever became the Trojan people again in some form somewhere else. And it was that they destroyed Troy. So they've had let survivors. Anus would be a creator of Rome. He would find Rome, be a founder of Rome. And Helenus would find many other lands. He would ultimately be taken captive, and then he would be with his captors for many years. And his captors would ultimately, when they one of his captors started to die because he was a king of some land, he actually appointed him king over to take his place. So he ended up being king over more than one land, over two lands, I think 2 lands at least. So that's interesting to note, that Helenus actually wasn't a king over one land. He was a king over at least 2 lands. And in the end, that's what he was doing. The way that a person will experience their God is either through themselves by being possessed by it, or and then they experience their god as themselves, which means the Trojan men that were possessed by Mars. Well, for instance, Hector was a Trojan man that was heavily possessed by Mars, and also why he was the best at sword fighting and the best hero, warrior. Because Mars the god would get into Hector literally, and Hector would be Mars the god when he was possessed by him. But Hector would see God as, or his God as himself. So Hector didn't really have a relationship with Mars in any sense that was different from just having a relationship with himself. Hector didn't think he was God. He knew who Mars was. He knew that Mars was uh, not him, and he also knew that he was not Mars. But he knew that when Mars possessed him, he knew that he was, in fact, in a sense, God himself, Mars himself, Hector himself, which was ultimately the ego incarnate. The ego was the part that was the God that knew it. And when the God possessed you, you would be a warrior that would fight like, well, I mean, you'd fight like a god because you were. And when a god got into you, well, if the Mars was in somebody, he replaced Eris. That's why Mars showed up. So this is also not in the mythology. So what I'm telling you is that Mars showed up after Eris disappeared. If you read the Iliad, the story of Troy, you'll find that Mars literally just kind of showed up in the story. Eris kind of just disappeared from the story. And that's because Eris, he also pulled his eye out. That's also not in the mythology. So Eris had actually stuck his finger in his eye and pulled his eyeball out and threw it on the ground. And that was when he declared the other Eris, the goddess of discord, as he declared, that's Eris, the god of war, got mad at the goddesses for whatever reason. They decided to fight to the death, or to the, like, I hate your ass forever. Well, it was ultimately Athena who was literally learning how to be a sword fighter, because he taught Athena how to be a sword fighter. She actually got, and she was planning on killing him, but she was trying to act like she was his brother and loving him still. So he got all messed up because there was a plot to kill him for a long time, and so all the goddesses were going to him, pretending like they were his friend, and trying to get information. It's not easy to kill a god. It's really not. In fact, having the first spot in the pantheon, as Eris did, it's kind of really impossible to kill a god. But they were determined to do it. So they had to, like, literally plan it out for many years, and it took many years. And so it was a long plan. All of the goddesses had to get his trust. That was the first little deceitful plan. And so he would have to actually trust them, like, totally, which meant that between the time they were fighting and decided to kill each other or hate each other, well, that happened already. But then now they wanted to kill him, and he won't even talk to him, and they won't even talk to him. So then they have to have this ruse that we're going to apologize to him and see how we're wrong. So after they would fight to the point where they couldn't even talk to each other anymore, then the goddesses would decide to kill him for it, and then they would also hatch a plan that we have to go back and apologize to him now and say we're sorry. And so that was part of the. Then there was another 2 or 3 years played out where they were getting his trust 100%. So they're really nice to him, but it was all a plot to kill him, which meant that it screwed up his head. The god Eris went kind of mad because he couldn't. His sisters were acting like they liked him, but they were planning on killing him. So he couldn't figure it out as a god. Even he couldn't figure it out. He wasn't like a mind reader. Isn't that strange that he couldn't read his sisters' minds to see if they would want to kill him? Yeah, they were being nice. So it made his mind suspicious of everybody, and he started to really be not so good, not so great. Anyways, that would be the story. Troy would fall because it was egotistical, and it was also the ego, Ares. and Leo is Apollo, the sun god, and Sagittarius is Zeus. And those are all the energies that we have today. Literally, they're still the way that they were then or are now, except to say where they changed a little bit. Trojans either going to have dad as Jupiter, Zeus, who today is different from back then, because back then Zeus carried a lightning rod around with him. That was his weapon. So it was like a soldier. He carried a gun. So he had his lightning rod everywhere he went. Zeus is not the same. The reason why Jehovah or Yahweh is a god that's not Zeus, thought to be Zeus anymore. Well, it is Zeus. The same Zeus that used to exist is the same god that exists today, or is, if it's not some alien up in a spaceship instead. But so we're assuming that if it's not an alien in a spaceship instead, then it is Zeus, and then Yahweh is still Yahweh, and the God we have today is Zeus that's been changed because Zeus has his daughter in a way that truly could work now, and he's loving on her and accepting her, and ultimately that's why the goddesses will be okay. And back then in the Trojan War, they would have a problem because Zeus would look at his daughter as a vixen. He called her a vixen, and he would even threaten to kill her, and his wife he threatened to kill. They tried to overthrow him. I mean, a lot of stuff happened. Crazy stuff happened. I'll be back with another one. Thanks.